Elias Mercer lived on the edge of the colony where the lights were fewer and the nights were louder. Wind moved across the metal roofs like a restless animal, and the distant hum of atmospheric machines never fully stopped. He liked it that way. Noise meant the world was still working. Silence meant something had gone wrong. He finished tightening the last bolt on the processor tower and wiped his hands on a cloth. The sky above was dark, purple, heavy with clouds. An ion storm was coming. The weather warnings had been repeating all evening. But storms were common on this planet. People learned to live with them. Elias walked back to his small house, boots crunching on gravel. The house was old by colony standards, built when the settlement was still new and hopeful. He had fixed it himself over the years. It was not pretty, but it was strong. That mattered more. Inside, the lights flickered once as the wind picked up. Elias checked the power readings, then moved toward the small room where his daughter slept. Mara was 7 years old, thin, quiet, and far too observant for her age. She slept curled under a blanket, one hand wrapped around a small toy shuttle. Elias stood there for a moment, listening to her breathe. After that, he locked the door, set the storm shields, and sat down with a cup of reheated tea. The past stayed quiet when he was busy. That was how he liked it. Then someone knocked. It was not a polite knock. It was uneven, weak, almost lost under the rising wind. Elias frowned and stood. No one came this far out during a storm unless something was wrong. The knock came again, followed by a soft sound, like someone sliding down the door. Elias opened it. A woman collapsed forward, and he barely caught her before she hit the floor. She was light, lighter than she should have been, and cold through her soaked clothing. Rainwater and faint glowing patterns ran across her skin like living lines of light. She was not human. Elias pulled her inside and shut the door, heart pounding. He laid her on the floor and stepped back, forcing himself to breathe. He had seen aliens before, years ago, back when he wore a uniform and answered to orders. This woman was different. Her features were close enough to human to be unsettling, but not close enough to ignore. Her eyes were larger. Her skin held a soft shimmer, and the markings along her neck pulsed slowly. Her lips moved. "Please," she whispered, voice shaking. "I am late." Elias grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around her. "You're safe," he said, though he was not sure if that was true. "You need medical help." "Say, you need medical help?" She shook her head weakly. "No authorities. Please. I was sent to be received." "Received by who?" Elias asked. She looked at him, confused, as if the answer should be obvious. "My bonded protector, the human named Alaric Voss." Elias felt his stomach drop. That name was known across the colonies. A high-level Terran diplomat. A man who had died 3 months ago in a classified shuttle accident. "You're at the wrong place," Elias said carefully. "He doesn't live here." Her glowing markings flickered wildly. "That is not possible," she said. "The vow path does not fail." Before Elias could respond, a small voice spoke from the hallway. "Daddy." Mara stood there in her sleep clothes, rubbing her eyes. She looked at the woman on the floor, then at Elias. "She's cold," Mara said simply. Elias turned. "Mara, go back to bed." But Mara did not move. She walked closer, kneeling beside the alien woman without fear. She took the edge of the blanket and tucked it tighter. "It's okay," Mara said to her. The woman stared at the child, breathing unevenly. Her eyes filled with something that looked like relief. "She says I am home," the woman whispered. Elias opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. The storm outside roared louder, and the house shook slightly as shields engaged. Mara looked up at Elias. "She knocked on the right door," she said with calm certainty. "God sent her." Elias swallowed. He was not a religious man, but something in Mara's voice made his skin prickle. He helped the woman onto the couch and activated a basic medical scan. The readings were strange but stable. Exhaustion, dehydration, fear. A lot of fear. "My name is Salen," the woman said once she could speak again. I am the bond-bearer of the Ilyari clans. Elias nodded slowly. I'm Elias. This is my daughter, Mara. Selen tried to sit up. I must complete the vow. If I do not, my people will be punished. What vow? Elias asked. The bride vow, she said softly. I was given to humanity to bind our futures and prevent war. Elias felt the weight of those words settle into the room. You were sent to marry someone. To be protected, Selen corrected. To be bonded until the union is complete. Mara tilted her head. That sounds lonely. Selen looked at her and smiled faintly. It was. The lights flickered again. This time, the flicker came with a sharp tone from the warning system. Elias moved to the console. Long-range sensors were active. Something was entering low orbit, not Terran. He felt an old instinct wake up inside him, one he had buried under years of quiet work and routine. He closed the sensor display before Selen could see it. Who else knows you're here? Elias asked. No one was meant to know, Selen said. But the path broke. Someone interfered. Outside, thunder rolled like distant weapons fire. Elias looked at his small house, at his daughter, at the alien woman who had arrived carrying the weight of entire civilizations. He thought of the man he used to be, and the man he was trying to remain. You can stay, he said finally. For now. Selen closed her eyes, and the glowing lines on her skin softened. Then, the vow has not failed, she whispered. Mara smiled and leaned against Elias's leg. See, she said. Wrong door. Right people. Above the colony, unseen by most, unknown ships adjusted their orbit and began to search. And in a quiet house at the edge of the world, humanity's test had already begun. Morning came slowly, pushed in by gray light and the distant sound of machinery restarting after the storm. Elias had not slept. He sat at the small table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea, listening to the quiet movements inside the house. Quiet did not mean peace. It meant waiting. Selen slept on the couch, wrapped in blankets. The glow on her skin was faint now, like embers after a fire. Mara lay on the floor beside her, one arm stretched out as if guarding her. Elias had tried to move his daughter back to her bed, but Mara had refused, gripping the blanket with stubborn strength. He had let her stay. Elias stood and checked the sensors again. The unknown ships were still in orbit, hidden behind the planet's magnetic field. They were careful. That made them dangerous. He heard Selen stir and turned. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light. She sat up, moving carefully, as if her body was still learning gravity. You did not leave, she said. I said you could stay, Elias replied. I meant it. She looked around the room, taking in the simple furniture, the worn walls, the child asleep on the floor. This place is small. It's enough, Elias said. Mara woke and smiled when she saw Selen awake. Good morning, she said brightly. Do aliens eat eggs? Selen paused, then let out a soft sound that might have been laughter. Yes. Not like humans do, but yes. Daddy makes good eggs, Mara said with confidence. Elias sighed. I make acceptable eggs. As Elias cooked, Selen explained more, choosing her words with care. Her people, the Ilyari, believed deeply in balance. Long ago, they had nearly destroyed themselves through endless cycles of revenge. The bond-bearer tradition was created to stop wars before they began. One life, freely given, to protect millions. You were raised for this? Elias asked. Yes, Selen said. From the moment I was chosen, I was taught languages, customs, patience. I was taught to endure. Mara frowned. That's not fair. Selen looked at her. Fairness is not the same across the stars. Elias placed plates on the table. You said you were sent to a man who's dead. Yes, Alaric Voss. He was known to my people as a steady voice, a human who honored words. Elias felt a tightness in his chest. Then someone lied to you, or hid the truth. Selen lowered her gaze. If the vow is broken, My people will assume betrayal. Others will use that as reason for war. And the ships in orbit? Elias asked. They are not Iliari, Salen said quietly. They are watchers, opportunists. As if summoned by the word, Elias's console chimed. A short-range transmission request appeared. Coded, but aggressive. He ignored it. We need to move, Elias said. This colony isn't hidden enough. Mara looked between them. Are they bad? They are curious, Salen said gently. And curiosity can become cruelty. Elias packed supplies with calm efficiency. Old habits returned easily. Tools, rations, emergency power cells. He hesitated, then unlocked a case he had not opened in years. Inside were the remains of his service gear. He did not put on the uniform, but he took the communicator and a compact defensive device. They left through the back, moving toward an old maintenance tunnel that led into the rocky hills beyond the settlement. The colony was waking now, people stepping out to inspect storm damage, unaware of the eyes watching from above. The tunnel was dark and narrow, smelling of dust and oil. Mara walked between Elias and Scielen, holding both their hands. Scielen seemed stronger now, her posture more steady. You are afraid, Salen said to Elias as they walked. Yes, he answered honestly. Yet you still protect. That's what humans do, Elias said. Even when we shouldn't. Salen considered that. Then perhaps the vow chose better than it knew. They reached a hidden exit overlooking a dry valley. Elias activated a ground transport he had hidden there long ago. Back when he still believed in backup plans, before they could move, the air changed. A shape descended from the sky, smooth and silent. Another followed. Then another. The watchers had found them. A voice filled the valley, amplified and cold. Salen of the Iliari, you are out of alignment. Return for correction. Mara tightened her grip. I don't like them, she whispered. Elias stepped forward, placing himself between the voice and the others. She's under my protection. There was a pause. You are not the bonded human. No, Elias said. But I'm here. A smaller craft descended, opening like a mechanical flower. Figures emerged, tall and sharp-edged, their movements precise. Salen moved closer to Elias. They will test you, she said softly. They believe humans only honor vows when watched. Then they'll be disappointed, Elias replied. He activated his communicator and sent a message on an old frequency, one few remembered. A call for help, not to the government, but to people like him. Those who lived on the edges, those who still listened. The lead watcher spoke again. Step aside, human. This matter is not yours. Elias did not move. Everything that comes to my door is my matter. The figures advanced, then the ground shook. From the hills, engines roared to life. Old ships, patched and mismatched, rose into the sky. Independent haulers, survey rigs, even a medical transport. They formed a loose line between the watchers and the valley. A voice crackled over open comms. You okay down there, Mercer? Elias smiled faintly. I am now. The watchers hesitated. They had not expected this. Humanity was not unified, not efficient. But it was stubborn. Salen watched in silence as human ships, small and imperfect, stood their ground without orders or treaties. They came, she whispered. They always do, Elias said. The standoff lasted minutes that felt like hours. Finally, the watchers retreated, lifting back into orbit without another word. Mara cheered softly. See? They're scared of you. They are not scared, Salen said. They are confused. That is worse. They did not return to the colony. Instead, they moved deeper into the hills, to an old listening post, long since abandoned. Elias knew it well. He had helped build it. As night fell again, Salen stood outside, looking at the stars. My people believe destiny is written, she said. But today, I saw humans write their own. Mara sat beside her. God still sent you. she said firmly. Silen smiled. Perhaps. Or perhaps God sent me to learn something. Elias watched them, feeling the weight of what was coming settle fully onto his shoulders. The galaxy had noticed a small house, a wrong door, and a man who refused to step aside. And it was only the beginning. The hills were quiet, but the silence was heavy with tension. Elias, Salen, and Mara had settled into the abandoned listening post, its walls cold and metallic, but offering enough cover. The transport they had hidden in the valley was dismantled and scattered, ready to be reassembled at a moment's notice. Elias checked the surroundings constantly, every shadow and distant sound setting his nerves on edge. He had spent years learning to survive, but this was different. This was a responsibility he had not chosen, yet one that could not be ignored. Salen moved with careful precision, examining the old equipment as if it might offer them a new advantage. Her skin glowed faintly under the dim lights, the bioluminescent markings reflecting her steady heartbeat. "They will return," she said softly, not as a warning, but as a statement of fact. "They will," Elias agreed. "But they won't find us here so easily." Mara, meanwhile, had claimed a small corner of the post as her own. She arranged the few supplies they had, small toys, scraps of cloth, and a few of Elias's personal trinkets, turning the cold space into a place that felt safe. She glanced at Salen and said, "You can stay forever if you want. I like having you here." Salen's eyes softened. "I am honored," she said, "but I cannot stay forever. My people will expect me to return. And the vow, it cannot be ignored forever." "Then we'll make sure it matters," Elias said firmly. "If they come back, we'll be ready." Hours passed. Elias used the post's old communication arrays to send coded messages to scattered human colonies. He did not ask for soldiers or diplomats, he asked for watchers, allies who were independent and loyal only to their own sense of justice, people who understood that the universe often ignored rules, and that sometimes action mattered more than law. By evening, responses trickled in. Small freighters, maintenance ships, and civilian craft started appearing in the skies around the valley. None were official. None carried weapons of mass destruction. They were ordinary people willing to stand with a man who refused to abandon a scared alien woman at his doorstep. Salen observed silently, awe in her eyes. "Your species. They act without thought for command or law, only for principle." Elias glanced at her. "Principle is what keeps people human. Indefined to indeeded." End quote. Mara ran from the corner to the edge of the platform, waving at the distant ships. "See, they came. They are risking themselves," Salen said, "and they do not know what they face." Elias nodded. "That's humans. We do not wait for permission to do what is right." The night grew colder, the wind howling through the hills, carrying faint echoes of the storm from days before. From orbit, the watchers, those who had first descended, watched carefully, their sensors scanning for movement. They had underestimated humanity. That error would not repeat. Suddenly, the communications panel lit up with an incoming message. Elias answered, expecting a challenge, only to hear a voice he recognized from his past. A voice from the edges of human colonies. "Elias Mercer?" the voice asked. "We read your message. You are not alone." "I never was," Elias replied. The voice confirmed that dozens of independent human crews were already mobilizing to join him. Their plan was simple: protect Salen until she could be safely returned, or until the galaxy recognized that humanity would not abandon those under its care. Salen's glowing lines flickered with emotion she did not yet understand. "Humans are unpredictable, but they are remarkable." Elias watched her closely. "You're starting to understand why I never wanted to be a diplomat." Mara giggled. "Diplomats are boring." "You're not boring." The next morning, the watchers struck again. Small crafts moved into the hills, attempting to surround the post. Elias had anticipated this. Sensors had detected the approach, and the human allies had positioned themselves in hidden passes. The watchers opened communications. "Salen of the Ilyari. Leave willingly. There will be no negotiation. Selen of the Ilyari. Elias stepped forward, standing on the platform's edge. I said no yesterday. I will say it again. You will not take her. A pause. Then, in a voice cold and precise, you cannot protect her forever. And, perhaps not, Elias said. But while I can, I will. The standoff lasted hours. The Watchers' ships moved closer, scanning every inch of the valley. Human freighters, small and mismatched, formed a shield. They had no orders, no unified command, but they had something the Watchers had not expected. Humans were willing to risk themselves for principle. For a small girl's declaration that she was safe. For the alien who had knocked on the wrong door. Selen watched quietly, understanding something that had been only theoretical. Humanity did not rely on strength alone. They relied on something deeper. A stubborn will, loyalty, and the courage to act even when failure seemed inevitable. Finally, the Watchers retreated, leaving the valley in uneasy silence. Elias exhaled slowly. Mara cheered softly. Selen placed her hand on his arm. You have shown me a new way, she said. Elias shook his head. I didn't do it for you. I did it because it was the right thing. That's what humans do. Selen studied Mara, who was now hugging the alien woman tightly. The child. She sees the path more clearly than many elders I have met. Perhaps fate uses children to guide us. Mara looked up at Selen. I told you God sent you here. I think I was right. Selen smiled, a faint glow along her markings brightening. Perhaps. Or perhaps the universe has a different way of testing humans than we imagined. Over the next days, Elias worked with his human allies to prepare for any further attempts by the Watchers. They reinforced hidden paths, created decoys, and trained small teams in basic defense. Selen learned quickly, her body still delicate, but her mind sharp. She adapted human techniques to her own abilities, blending them in ways no human could anticipate. Through it all, Mara remained a quiet observer. She asked questions, shared her small thoughts, and occasionally offered ideas that seemed far wiser than her years. Her bond with Selen grew. And in that bond, Elias began to see a new hope, a possibility that peace could be maintained, not by treaties or threats, but by understanding and action. One night, as the three of them sat under the open sky, Selen spoke. Your species, you survive not because of power or numbers. You survive because you choose to act. Even against impossible odds. Elias smiled faintly. That's humans. We've had to be. The universe doesn't wait for the timid. Mara pointed at the stars. Do you think the Watchers will come again? They will, Elias said honestly. But we will be ready. Selen's eyes glimmered in the starlight. Then perhaps the vow is no longer just about me. It is about what humanity can do. What it will do. When it chooses to stand for others. Elias looked at the girl and the alien woman, feeling the weight of the galaxy pressing down on them. But he also felt something lighter, a belief that humans, in their stubborn and unpredictable ways, could change what fate had written. In the quiet of that hilltop, surrounded by old machines and distant ships, Elias Mercer, Mara, and Selen prepared for the next chapter. It would be difficult, dangerous, perhaps impossible, but they were together, and that was enough. And somewhere deep in the stars, Watchers recalculated their assumptions. They had underestimated humanity. That was a mistake they would not make again. But humanity had already moved beyond fear. It had begun to act. Elias watched the horizon, feeling the first stirrings of hope in a galaxy that had not yet learned the full measure of human courage. And Selen, the bond-bearer raised for duty and destiny, began to see something she had never been taught to expect. Humans could create their own fate. And sometimes, that choice could be more powerful than any vow or treaty. The stars watched silently as the small group prepared. The universe was testing them. But humanity had a habit of passing tests no one thought they could, and this test had only just begun. The sun rose slowly over the hills, casting long shadows across the valley. Elias stood at the edge of the listening post, watching the horizon. The alien ships had not returned overnight. But he knew they would. They were patient, precise, and ruthless. Still, Elias felt no fear. Not for himself, not for Mara, and not for Selen. Whatever came, they would face it together. Selen moved beside him, her glowing markings faint in the morning light. She had learned much in the days since her arrival about humans, about courage, about unexpected alliances, and she had learned that Elias Mercer, the man who had opened his door to her in a storm, was not a diplomat, a soldier, or a hero in the conventional sense. He was something rarer, a human willing to act when it mattered most. Mara appeared, skipping across the platform with a bundle of supplies. "Breakfast," she announced. "Eggs. And pancakes if we're lucky." Elias chuckled. "I think we're lucky enough for eggs." Selen smiled faintly, watching the child. Mara's innocence, her certainty, and her unwavering faith in what was right had done more to save her than any weapons or ships. Selen realized that humans had a strength she had never fully understood. They fought not for power or duty alone, but for each other, and sometimes for the smallest among them. Their moment of calm was interrupted by the faint hum of engines. From the hills, distant lights flickered as the watchers approached. They came not in one wave, but in several, surrounding the valley carefully. Elias had prepared. Of course, human freighters, transport ships, and old maintenance vessels had formed a scattered network, hidden and ready to strike. "They are patient," Selen said, her voice steady. "And they are sure. Fermon. And they are sure. I was not pieces. Firstiver say. Firstivland. 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 I was not pieces. Firstivland. Firstivland under say. Firstivland under say." "They have to be," Elias replied. "But patience alone won't win this." The watcher's voice echoed across the valley. "Selen of the Ilyari. You must return immediately. You are not protected by humans or their weak laws. Step aside, or be removed by force." Elias stepped forward, placing himself in the line of sight. "I have nothing to say to you but this. She is under my protection. Not because of law. Not because of duty. Because it is right. You will not take her." There was silence for a long moment. Then the lead watcher's voice returned, colder than ever. "You are reckless. You do not understand the consequences of your choice." Elias did not respond. He had spent years understanding consequences, and he had also learned that action often mattered more than words. The humans he had called for were ready, hidden in the hills and the valleys, silent but alert. Every vessel, every person, was prepared to risk themselves for what they knew was right. Selen studied the humans, her mind racing. She had been trained to serve, to obey, to follow a path determined before her birth. But here, she saw something entirely new. Humans did not follow paths, they created them. They did not obey, they chose. And when they chose, their choices carried power far beyond the dictates of treaties or orders. The watchers made the first move. Small crafts descended into the valley, testing the humans' positions. Sensors flared, and warning alarms rang. Human ships responded, not with overwhelming force, but with clever tactics. Decoys, rapid maneuvers, and precise interference disrupted the watchers' scans. They could not see what humans wanted them to see, and that confusion gave Elias and his allies the advantage. From her position, Selen could barely hide her admiration. Humans were flawed, unpredictable, sometimes reckless, but in those flaws lay their greatest strength. Courage was not a matter of training or authority. It was a choice, and humans chose it when it mattered most. Mara's small voice broke through the tension. "Daddy, they're scared. They're confused," Elias corrected with a faint smile. "There's a difference. Confusion is better than fear." The standoff stretched for hours. The watchers probed, tested, tried to find weaknesses. Humans responded, always adapting, always protecting Silen without hesitation. Elias moved among the freighters, communicating with crews, adjusting plans. Silen followed his lead, learning quickly how humans combined instinct with logic, improvisation with loyalty. By evening, the Watchers withdrew. Their ships lifted from the valley, retreating into orbit without another word. Elias exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of relief settle across the post. Mara cheered softly, running to Silen and hugging her tightly. "You see?" she said proudly. "We won." Silen smiled, a faint glow brightening her skin. It was not victory in the way I was trained to know. It was something different, stronger. Elias placed a hand on Mara's shoulder. "Humans win in ways no one expects," he said. "Not by power, but by choice." The following days were quieter, but not without purpose. Elias and his human allies repaired hidden positions, reinforced tunnels, and prepared for any return of the Watchers. They trained quickly, shared knowledge, and strengthened bonds. Silen adapted human methods to her abilities, creating defenses that combined alien skill with human ingenuity. Mara watched closely, asking questions, learning in her quiet, fearless way. One evening, under the star-filled sky, Silen spoke. "I was raised to follow the vow, to be bound by destiny. But now, I see that vows are not just rules. They are promises that can be upheld by choice, by courage, by will." Elias nodded. "That's humanity. We do not always have the luxury of destiny. We have to act. And sometimes, acting is more powerful than any law or treaty." Mara leaned against Silen. "You can stay forever, right?" she asked simply. Silen laughed softly, a sound like wind through glass. "Forever? Perhaps not. But as long as I am needed, I will stay. Because you and your father have shown me what it means to protect without expectation, to fight without hate, and to love without obligation." Days turned into weeks. Word of Elias's actions spread across human colonies, whispered among pilots and freighters. The story of the wrong door became a symbol, a lesson taught quietly. Humans were unpredictable, loyal, and willing to act for what was right, even against impossible odds. The Ilyari emissaries, once so rigid and distant, observed from afar. They saw that humanity could protect a single individual against an entire fleet, not with overwhelming strength, but with courage, principle, and cooperation. They revised old assumptions, and Silen's role as the bond-bearer shifted from duty to choice, from obligation to partnership. Eventually, the Watchers returned, not with hostility, but with recognition. They approached with careful diplomacy, no longer expecting to take Silen by force. Elias met them openly, standing beside Silen and Mara. His calm authority, his refusal to abandon what was right, had changed the balance. Silen looked at Elias, then at the representatives. "I choose my own path," she said clearly. "And humanity has shown me how to honor vows through action, not fear." The Watchers acknowledged her choice. The treaties were rewritten, not to bind her, but to respect her decision. She would remain with Elias and Mara, not as a bride, but as a protector, an ambassador, and a friend. One evening, as the three of them sat under the open sky, Mara asked, "Do you think God sent you here?" Silen smiled, her skin glowing faintly in the starlight. "Perhaps God did. Or perhaps the universe sent me to learn something I could never have learned any other way." Elias reached for Mara's hand. "It doesn't matter. The universe tested us. And humans." Humans answered by opening the door. Mara laughed softly. "I told you we were the right people." Silen nodded. "You were. And now, I understand. Humanity's strength is not in power or numbers. It is in choice, in courage, and in the willingness to protect others, even when it is difficult, even when it is dangerous." The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night. Ships returned to their posts, alliances held steady, and for the first time in her life, Seylen felt a sense of belonging she had never known. The galaxy had tested humanity. It had expected weakness, hesitation, and failure, but humans had acted with wisdom and courage, showing that even a single choice, a single act of protection, could ripple across worlds and change the course of history. Elias watched Mara and Seylen together, feeling hope settle like sunlight over the hills. The universe was vast, full of danger and uncertainty, but for the first time, he felt that humanity could meet it not with weapons alone, but with heart, determination, and the courage to do what was right. And somewhere far above, watchers and emissaries alike realized that the galaxy had underestimated humanity. That mistake would not be forgotten, but it had already been made. Humans were capable of more than anyone could imagine. They could choose courage over fear, protection over indifference, and love over obligation. And in a quiet house at the edge of the world, a small girl, her father, and an alien woman who had arrived at the wrong door had rewritten what the galaxy understood about strength, destiny, and the true meaning of honor. The stars watched in silence as humans, stubborn and unpredictable, proved that even in a universe of power and politics, choice could be stronger than fate, and humanity, in all its flawed, unpredictable glory, would always rise to meet the challenge. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and humanity had only just begun.